A young woman screams in pain. Her own mother stands over her with hatred in her eyes. But watch what happens when a single father sees the truth. He does something that will restore your faith in humanity, a proposal that changes everything, a love that heals the deepest wounds. Stay until the end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Would you have done the same? Answer in the comments. Summer of 1972. A small town called Millbrook, somewhere in rural Tennessee. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where secrets are hard to keep, but people still look the other way when they should speak up. In a weathered white house at the end of Maple Street lived 20-year-old Rebecca Hayes with her mother, Margaret Hayes. From the outside, it looked like any other home in Millbrook. White picket fence, a porch with rocking chairs, flowers in the window boxes. But inside those walls, hell existed every single day. Rebecca's father had died when she was just 8 years old. A farming accident that took him too soon. After that, something broke inside Margaret. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was anger at the world. Maybe it was something that had always been there waiting to come out. Whatever it was, Margaret Hayes became a monster to her own daughter, not the kind of monster from fairy tales, the real kind, the kind that lives in your own home and calls itself your mother. Every morning, Rebecca woke up not knowing what would set her mother off. Sometimes it was the way she made the coffee, too weak, too strong, too hot, too cold. Sometimes it was the way she walked, the way she breathed, the way she existed. Margaret found reasons everywhere. A dish not washed properly, a floor not scrubbed enough, a word spoken too softly or too loudly. And every time the punishment was the same. Fists, open hands, whatever object was closest. A wooden spoon, a belt, a broomstick. Rebecca had bruises on top of bruises, purple marks on her arms that never fully healed before new ones appeared. Her back was a map of pain, crisscrossed with welts and scars. She wore long sleeves even in the Tennessee heat, high collars that covered her neck. She learned to move carefully, to speak quietly, to make herself as small and invisible as possible. But it was never enough. Her mother was a monster who fed on her daughter's fear and pain. The young woman had no escape. She had no job because Margaret refused to let her work. No friends because Margaret drove them all away. No money because every cent in the house belonged to her mother. Rebecca was a prisoner in her own home, serving a life sentence for the crime of being born. She thought about running away 1,000 times, but where would she go? She had nothing. No education beyond high school, no skills, no one who would help her. People in Millbrook knew something was wrong. They saw Rebecca at the grocery store with bruises on her wrists. They heard the screaming from the Hayes house late at night. But this was 1972 in a small southern town. People believed that what happened inside a family stayed inside a family. They looked away, they whispered among themselves but did nothing. And Rebecca suffered alone, believing that this was all she deserved, all she would ever have. Then one Saturday morning in July, everything changed. Rebecca was at the general store buying groceries for her mother. She reached for a can on the top shelf and winced in pain. Her ribs were still sore from 2 nights before when Margaret had kicked her for burning the dinner roast. A man's voice spoke behind her. "Let me help you with that, ma'am." Rebecca turned and saw Thomas Miller, a single father who had moved to Millbrook 6 months earlier with his 5-year-old daughter, Emma. Thomas was 35 years old, a carpenter by trade. His wife had died in childbirth with their second baby, and both mother and child were lost that terrible day. He came to Millbrook to start over, to raise his daughter somewhere quiet and peaceful. Thomas was tall, with kind brown eyes and rough carpenter's hands. He had seen Rebecca around town before, always noticed how she seemed to carry the weight of the world on her thin shoulders, how she never smiled, how she moved like someone expecting to be hit. He reached up and got the can for her. As he handed it to her, their fingers touched briefly. Rebecca pulled back like she had been burned. "Sorry," she whispered. "Always apologizing, always afraid." Thomas noticed the bruise on her wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up, a dark purple mark shaped like fingers. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just smiled gently and told her to have a good day. But Thomas Miller was not the kind of man who looked away. That night he asked around town about Rebecca Hayes. What he heard made his blood boil. People told him about Margaret Hayes, about the screaming, about the bruises everyone pretended not to see. They told him Rebecca had no way out, that her mother controlled everything, that the poor girl was trapped. Thomas lay awake that night, thinking about his own daughter Emma. What if someone was hurting her and nobody helped? The thought made him sick. The next Sunday, Thomas did something bold. He went to the Hayes house. He knocked on that door, knowing he might not be welcome. Margaret answered, her face already twisted with suspicion. "What do you want?" Thomas took off his hat respectfully and said he was looking to hire someone to help clean his house and watch his daughter a few hours a week. He had heard Rebecca might be available. He would pay fair wages. Margaret's eyes narrowed. She looked Thomas up and down. Her monster mind was calculating, always calculating. Money was money, and having Rebecca out of the house a few hours a week meant she could have her friends over without that pathetic girl hanging around. "Fine," Margaret said. "She can work for you, but the money comes to me. She's my daughter and she lives under my roof." Thomas agreed, though it disgusted him. He knew he had to play this carefully. Rebecca started working at Thomas's house 3 days a week. At first, she was terrified. She moved through his home like a ghost, barely speaking, jumping at every sudden sound. Little Emma would try to talk to her, but Rebecca hardly knew how to respond. She had forgotten how to be around kindness. Thomas watched her carefully. He saw how she flinched when he moved too quickly, how she apologized for everything, how she ate the lunch he offered like someone who was never sure when the next meal would come. Weeks passed. Slowly, carefully, Thomas showed Rebecca what it meant to be treated with respect. He never raised his voice, never made sudden movements around her. He said please and thank you. He told her she did good work. Small things, normal things, things that should not have been revolutionary, but were to a young woman whose mother was a monster. Rebecca began to relax, just a little. She smiled at Emma. She accepted a glass of sweet tea without apologizing 3 times first. One afternoon, Rebecca was washing dishes when she dropped a plate. It shattered on the floor. She immediately fell to her knees, hands shaking, tears already forming. I'm so sorry, please, I'll replace it, I'll pay for it, please don't." Thomas had been in the next room and came in quickly. He saw her on the floor, saw the terror in her eyes, and understood everything in that moment. He knelt down slowly, carefully. "Rebecca," he said softly, "it's just a plate. I'm not angry. You're not in trouble. Please, it's okay." But Rebecca could not stop shaking. The tears came harder, years of pain pouring out over a broken plate. Thomas did something then that surprised them both. He gently, very gently, put his hand on her shoulder. Just rested it there. Rebecca froze. But his hand was warm and steady, and there was no violence in it. She began to cry in earnest, deep sobs that shook her whole body. Thomas stayed there beside her until the storm passed. After that day, something shifted between them. Rebecca began to talk a little about her life, never directly about the abuse, but Thomas could read between the lines. He saw the new bruises that appeared. He heard the tremor in her voice when she mentioned her mother. His heart broke for this young woman who had been so brutally broken by the person who should have protected her most. And somewhere in those summer months, Thomas realized he had fallen in love with Rebecca Hayes. It was not the kind of love from romance novels. It was deeper than that. He loved her courage, the way she kept going despite everything. He loved how gentle she was with Emma, how she slowly learned to smile again. He loved the person she was underneath all that pain, and he wanted to spend the rest of his life showing her what real love looked like, what a real family looked like. But he knew he had to be careful. Rebecca was fragile, still healing. He could not rush this. One September evening, Thomas asked Rebecca to stay for dinner. She hesitated, said her mother would be angry if she was late. Thomas offered to drive her home afterward and explained to Margaret that he had needed her to work late. Rebecca agreed. They ate together, the three of them. Thomas had made fried chicken and mashed potatoes. Emma chatted about her day at school. Rebecca laughed at something the little girl said, a real, genuine laugh. Thomas thought it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. After Emma went to bed, Thomas and Rebecca sat on the porch. The crickets were singing. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of honeysuckle. Thomas took a deep breath. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something. I know what's happening to you. I know your mother hurts you." Rebecca's face went pale. She started to stand up, started to make excuses, but Thomas gently asked her to wait. "Please, just listen. I can't stand by and watch this happen anymore. You deserve so much better than this. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be loved." "Rebecca, I know this might seem sudden, but I have thought about this every day for months. I want to offer you a way out. I want to offer you a life where nobody hurts you ever again. Rebecca Hayes, will you marry me?" The young woman stared at him like he had spoken a foreign language. "Marry you? But why? I'm nothing. I'm nobody. I'm damaged and broken, and I can't give you anything." Thomas reached out and very gently took her scarred hand in his rough carpenter's hand. "You're not nothing. You're strong and kind and brave. You survived a monster, and you're still capable of love. I see you, Rebecca, the real you, and I would be honored if you would be my wife, if you would be a mother to Emma, if you would let me spend every day proving to you that you are worthy of love," Rebecca cried. But these were different tears. For the first time in 12 years, someone was offering her hope. A single father was offering her escape, safety, love, a real life. She was terrified. What if she was not good enough? What if she could not be the wife he needed? But then she looked into Thomas's kind brown eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. She thought about little Emma, who already loved her. She thought about a life without fists and fear. And she whispered, yes. They married quickly and quietly 2 weeks later at the courthouse. Margaret Hayes raged when she found out. She showed up at Thomas's house screaming, calling Rebecca ungrateful, calling her names that should never be said about your own child. Thomas stepped between them. "Mrs. Hayes, Rebecca is my wife now. She lives here. If you ever threaten her or try to hurt her again, I will call the sheriff. You are not welcome in this house." Margaret looked at her daughter one last time with pure hatred and left. Rebecca never saw her mother again. The first months of marriage were not easy. Rebecca had nightmares. She flinched at sudden noises. She struggled to accept affection, to believe she deserved kindness. But Thomas was patient. He never pushed. He let her heal at her own pace. He held her when she cried. He reminded her every single day that she was safe now, that she was loved, that she was home. And slowly, week by week, month by month, Rebecca began to transform. The young woman who had been beaten down by her monster mother started to bloom. She smiled more. She laughed freely. She played with Emma without fear. She learned to cook, not out of terror, but out of joy. She planted flowers in the garden because she wanted to, not because someone forced her. She went to the store without long sleeves because she was no longer ashamed of her scars. Those scars were proof she survived. Proof she was stronger than the monster who tried to break her. Thomas kept every promise he made. He treated Rebecca with dignity and respect every single day. He never raised his hand to her, never raised his voice in anger. He showed her what it meant to be cherished, to be valued, to be truly loved. He built her a hope chest with his own hands, filled it with quilts and treasures. He taught her to read music, and they sang together on Sunday evenings. He introduced her to his friends as my beautiful wife, with such pride in his voice that Rebecca finally began to believe it herself. Emma blossomed too, with Rebecca as her mother. The little girl had someone gentle and loving to tuck her in at night, to braid her hair, to kiss her scraped knees. Rebecca poured all the love she never received into this child, who was not born from her body but was absolutely her daughter in every way that mattered. They became a real family, not perfect but real, built on love and respect and healing. Years passed. Rebecca and Thomas had 2 more children together, a son they named after Rebecca's father, and a daughter with Rebecca's green eyes. Their home was filled with laughter and warmth, the kind of home Rebecca had dreamed about as a little girl, but never thought she would have. She became known in Millbrook as the kindest woman in town, always ready to help someone in need, especially women who seemed trapped or afraid. She recognized the signs. She had lived them. Margaret Hayes died alone in 1985. Rebecca did not go to the funeral. Some people in town whispered that it was shameful for a daughter not to pay respects to her mother. But Thomas held Rebecca's hand and said she owed that woman nothing. The monster did not deserve tears from the daughter she tormented. Rebecca had forgiven for her own peace, but she did not have to pretend. She had a real family now, people who loved her the way she deserved. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Thomas gave Rebecca a locket. Inside were tiny photos of their 4 children. He told her this was what real love built. Not pain, not fear, but this, a family, a legacy, proof that she was never nothing, never broken beyond repair. She was always worthy of love. She just needed someone to see it. Rebecca held that locket and cried, but they were tears of joy. Tears for the girl she used to be and the woman she had become. Rebecca lived to be 83 years old. Thomas was by her side for 54 of those years until he passed peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, Rebecca stood surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. All of them were there because a single father saw a young woman being destroyed by her monster mother and decided to offer hope instead of looking away. All of them were there because love, real love, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. This story is a reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life, not with grand gestures or riches, but with simple human decency, with kindness, with courage to stand up when everyone else looks away. Thomas Miller did not slay a dragon, but he saved Rebecca from a monster just the same. He gave her what every human being deserves: dignity, respect, and love. Would you have had the courage to do what Thomas did? To step in when everyone else stayed silent? To offer hope to someone the world had given up on? Write your answer in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more true stories about the power of human kindness. Because every story of love conquering pain deserves to be told and remembered.